Hey, welcome back. Today I am talking about Shakespeare's Timon of Athens, which is a rather strange Shakespeare play that doesn't get a whole lot of love from many people. In fact, some people actually hate it. But it is one that I particularly love. It is a fascinating play, and one that definitely appeals to those of us who get frustrated with the hypocrisy and the leechingness of some of the world's elites. This is a story of misanthropy, about a man who generously gives and gives and gives to society, and then one day discovers how very little everyone around him values him. And so he completely changes course and begins to hate everyone and curse everyone. The more current term for this might be being black-pilled. He loses perspective of all value in the world, and begins to hate everyone. Now, it's clear that his antipathy towards his fake friends is definitely justified. But his overall worldview that all of humanity is just rotten to the core is wrong, as the play points out. His servants, for instance, are loyal, true, generous, and honest, even if a lot of the rich, famous elites in his world are very, very shallow and hollow. Another big interesting aspect about Timon is the actual writing of Timon. There's a lot of mystery surrounding it. It appears to be a co-authorship between Shakespeare and possibly Middleton. And it's odd that it happens in a time period when Shakespeare was mostly writing his own work. Early in Shakespeare's career, like with the early Henriade, he does a lot of co-authorship. And later in his career, with the Fletcher plays, he does a lot of co-authorship. But in the middle of his career, he was mostly writing his own work in its entirety. So it's odd that he chose to co-author Timon. Another odd thing about Timon is that it feels somewhat unfinished. Many people have commented on the irregularities, what appears to be holes in the story. Sometimes I think those cases are overstated. The story does have all the elements it needs to play completely out. Although some people feel like there ought to be more connections between the plots of Alcibiades and Timon, as well as more developed motivation in these characters. I personally find the story tends to hold together better than some people claim. On the other hand, there are irregularities, for instance, with the price of things. Athens uses the talent as a type of money, and it appears that Shakespeare and possibly Middleton weren't quite sure how much a talent was worth. Because we flip from 5 talents being a really big deal to suddenly 500 talents being a rather reasonable amount. And there is an inconsistency there. There's also the fact that most of the characters are undeveloped. There's only a few big characters who get a full development in this world. And the female characters of this book are particularly absent and undeveloped. There are only 2 instances when female characters at all show up in this piece. And that has led to some interesting commentary and criticism as well. There's enough irregularities within the play of Timon that some people claim that perhaps this is more of a draft than the actual final version. And there are even some theories that this was an abandoned play, one that was never fully finished and performed. It's a play that seems to fit chronologically shortly before Coriolanus, and so some people theorize that perhaps since Coriolanus develops similar themes, the themes of ingratitude and injustice on one of your great heroes, perhaps Shakespeare put Timon to the side and pursued those ideas in Coriolanus, a character who allowed for more development. The 2 main characters in this play, Timon and Alcibiades, are both pulled from very simple and short stories in Plutarch's Lives. And so as Shakespeare's source material kind of thin, he has to flesh it out considerably. It's also interesting that this play, to some extent, defies genre, as many of Shakespeare's plays do. It feels like a tragedy, but it also leans very heavily into satire, which is why some people theorize, along with the linguistic elements, that the other writer here is Middleton. The play explores the idea of duty and generosity. What does each man owe to his world? And what does man's wealth mean to him? Timon at the beginning uses his wealth to give gifts to all of his friends, believing that this elevates him up and also secures friendships to him. But when he runs out of money and everyone refuses to help him, his entire worldview that generosity breeds friendship and power crumbles. The fact that it's Timon's generosity that undoes him makes him very, very bitter. If you're an Ayn Rand fan, this might be an interesting play to read alongside a book like Atlas Shrugged, which also explores the role of wealth, generosity, and production in society and what all that means. There's also some complexity to the plot structure. The first 3 acts appear to be fairly well-rounded, but by the time you get to Act 4 and 5, they don't seem particularly cohesive, but rather a long string of related events, which also makes it feel somewhat unfinished. The play opens with 2 characters, a painter and a poet, who are discussing their works that they are going to sell to their patron, Timon. It's interesting that the painter and the poet, as creators and artists, are able to both be part of this world that attempts to fleece Timon of his goods, but also they are able to see and comment upon Timon and his role in this world. The poet in particular is able to see Timon as someone who is constantly struggling to the top of a very precarious mountain, where wealth elevates him, but it's easy to slip and fall. We meet other merchants and jewelers who are trying to sell their wares to Timon for much more than they're worth because he's so generous, and also several of Timon's friends who show up. Timon shows up and he begins to magnanimously respond to everyone, offering them much more than they offer him, keeping the balance always in his favor of generosity. He meets an old man whose daughter would like to marry one of Timon's poor servants. And because the old man refuses to let her marry without the young man being rich, Timon pours out wealth on the young man so the girl can marry a richer boy. Among his friends, though, enters a man named Epimantus, who is a cynical philosopher, one who sees all of this frivolousness as very hollow. And he also notes that everyone seems to be feeding off of Timon. In fact, there is a running image of cannibalism throughout this entire play, where people devour and eat, and they all seem to be feeding on Timon. And once he is consumed, they're no longer interested in him. Epimantus, who is continually compared to a dog throughout this play, is the one who's able to see through all of their emptiness. And Timon doesn't listen to him, but he's happy to have anyone around, and so he invites Epimantus to dinner as well. Also, the famous soldier and hero of Athens, Alcibiades, shows up and also gets welcomed into Timon's house. He too continues this imagery of cannibalism when he talks about feeding hungrily on the sight of Timon, since they haven't been able to see each other for a while. In the next scene, we cut to the lavish dinner that Timon hosts for all of his friends. And there we see Vindentius, who Timon paid bail for when he was in prison. And now Vindentius is free, and he's inherited the wealth of his father, and he tries to repay Timon, but Timon says, no, 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 otherwise that wouldn't have been a gift. Oh, by no means, honest Ventidius, you mistake my love. I gave it freely ever, and there's none can truly say he gives if he receives. If our betters play at that game, we must not dare to imitate them. Faults that are rich are fair. No, I can't say I gave you anything if I asked for it back. Then I wouldn't have been generous. Timon prides himself immensely in his generosity and his giving to others. It gives him this sense of superiority to have been so generous. Epimantus, on the other hand, is sitting down at his own table and chewing on roots and drinking water because he refuses to be part of the bounty, which is another word repeated throughout this book, that Timon pours out. I scorn thy meat, 'twould choke me, for I should ne'er flatter thee. O you gods, what a number of men eats Timon, and he sees them not. It grieves me to see so many dip their meat in one man's blood, and all the madnesses he cheers them up too. I wonder men dare trust themselves with men. Methinks they should invite them without knives, good for their meat, and safer for their lives. And as Timon continues to feed all of these people, Epimantus stands and gives grace over his own food. And he says, Immortal gods, I crave no pelf. I pray for no man but myself. Grant I may never prove so fond to trust man on his oath or bond, or harlot for her weeping, or a dog that seems a-sleeping, or a keeper with my freedom, or my friends, if I should need 'em. Amen. So fall to it. So Epimantus trusts no man. Unlike Timon, who trusts everyone. Timon, meanwhile, is giving a speech about friendship and generosity. The gods themselves have provided that I shall have much help from you. How had you been my friends else? Why have you that charitable title from thousands? Did you not chiefly belong to my heart? I have told more of you to myself than you can with modesty speak in your own behalf, and thus far I confirm you. Oh, you gods, think I, what need we have any friends if we should ne'er have need of 'em? They were the most needless creatures living, should we ne'er have use for them, and would most resemble sweet instruments hung up in cases, that keeps their sounds to themselves. Why, I have often wished myself poorer, that I might come nearer to you. We are born to do benefits, and what better or properer can we call our own than the riches of our friends? Oh, what a precious comfort 'tis to have so many, like brothers, commanding one another's fortunes. Oh, joys e'en made away, ere it can be borne, mine eyes cannot hold out water, methinks. To forget their faults I drink to you. This comments on Timon's entire philosophy of how friendship works. We're friends because we need each other. And so he's able to draw everyone closer to him by being necessary to them, being someone who is continually helping them with their needs. But they've learned this and become incredibly selfish in it. But it also emphasizes Timon's isolation. He wants to get people closer to him, but he's really just being used by everyone around him. And so he's very, very lonely and isolated, which is going to culminate in his withdrawal from society. Then a show with some dancing ladies is put on for everyone, Timon feeding their pleasures. And afterwards he orders his chief steward, Flavius, to bring him a box full of jewels. Flavius does so with gritted teeth. And to the side he reveals that Timon's wealth is rapidly shrinking, and Timon has almost nothing left, because of all the lavish parties he's been throwing. And Timon finishes the feast by handing out gifts to all of his friends. He gives a horse to a man who complimented the other day. He gives rich and valuable jewels to some of his guests. The only one who refuses to take anything is Epamantus, who warns Timon that he's giving away way too much, and that he doesn't need to trust all of these people, but Timon brushes him off. Act 2 begins with a senator who's looking through his paperwork and realizing that Timon's finances are probably sinking pretty fast, and the senator wants to get some money back from Timon that he loaned him. Timon has been incredibly irresponsible with his finances, as the senator points out. The senator says, "Still in motion of raging waste, it cannot hold, it will not. If I want gold, steal but a beggar's dog and give it to Timon. Why, the dog coins gold. If I would sell my horse and buy 20 more better than he, why give my horse to Timon? Ask nothing, give it him. It foals me straight and able horses. No porter at his gate, but rather one that smiles and still invites all that pass by. It cannot hold." He points out the economy of Timon. Every time Timon is given a gift, he feels like he has to return another gift even bigger. So everyone's begun to learn that about Timon, and so they give him these crummy gifts, and they get really fantastic gifts in return. If you give him a beggar's dog, he will return the dog's weight in gold. So everyone has been mooching and feeding off of Timon. And so the senator sends his servant to collect. We cut to Flavius, Timon's steward, who is going through all the finances and being incredibly frustrated that Timon refuses to listen to how dire things are. He brushes off everything. And now Timon is no longer incredibly wealthy, but actually incredibly in debt. The servants have had to borrow from all the other people in town in order to keep the flow of money going. And what's ironic is the people that they are borrowing from, who are now demanding repayment, are the same ones who are getting all that wealth back in gifts from Timon. This can only be hidden for so long, and as Timon is walking out, he suddenly gets flooded by all these servants of his creditors, trying to get their money back. And he finally realizes that something's wrong. And so he finally sits down to talk to his steward about it. There's a little scene in the middle here with Epamantus, a fool, and the creditors, which doesn't appear to fit very well, and seems to be one of those places where the play was still being edited and adapted and changed, and didn't get finished. Flavius finally makes Timon understand how serious everything is, and Timon says, "I wish you'd told me all this before," but Flavius points out that Timon never listened to him. And so Timon says, "No big deal, I'll just go ask for help from all of my wonderful friends. They're sure to give me some help after how much I've been good to them." But Flavius has already gone to ask all the senators, and was refused. Act 3 begins as Timon's servants go to different friends of Timon's, who Timon had given so much to earlier in the play, and each one refuses to help. These scenes are intensely frustrating. One useless friend who thinks Timon is going to send him a gift starts talking about, "Oh, I told Timon he shouldn't be so loose with his money," and then he offers to give the servant a job. but the servant throws his tip back in the man's face. Another friend hears how Timon has been asking for money, and brags how, oh, if only Timon had come to him first, he would have gladly given money. But when Timon's servant does show up and ask for money, the man refuses. It's just not a good time, you know? I just don't have the cash right now. Another of his friends gets all huffy because he was not the first one asked, and therefore, because he's thought so little of, he's not going to give Timon any money. Meanwhile, all the creditors are hounding poor Flavius, and Timon comes out in a rage and tells them all to go back to their masters. He's going to serve a big banquet for them all. And so they all return. After the invitation goes home to Timon's friends, we cut to a scene with Alcibiades. Alcibiades is pleading with the senators for his friend, a war hero, who in a brawl killed someone. Alcibiades is pointing out the many ways that this man has served his town, and served his country, and sacrificed himself for them. And so Alcibiades is pleading for the man's life. And he points out that the senators were happy to have that man spill his blood on their behalf, but now they're eagerly turning on the man. And Alcibiades links his fate with the man's, and says, hey, if you value me, if I am valuable to this city, please, I pledge my honor for his sake. And so then the senators turn and exile Alcibiades, after all he's done to serve the town. And so again we connect to the theme of ingratitude. These leaders who are happy to use these war heroes, but as soon as they're no longer useful, they're happy to also throw them away. We cut to Timon's final banquet. And all of his friends are arriving, and they're all discussing how, oh, Timon must have fooled us. He had us fooled. We thought he was out of money, but look, he's throwing another big banquet. Oh boy, I can't wait for the food and the presents. And although Timon welcomes them in, there's a kind of bitterness to his voice, and he keeps subtly saying things. When his friends give these half-hearted apologies for not helping him in his time of need, Timon's responses have this bitter undertone. And so in come all these covered dishes, and all the people are excited about the covered dishes. Ooh, it's gonna be a really fancy feast. And Timon stands up and gives a grace to the gods. You great benefactors, sprinkle our society with thankfulness. For your own gifts make yourselves praised, but reserve still to give, lest your deities be despised. Lend to each man enough, that one needs not lend to another. For were your godheads to borrow of men, men would forsake the gods. Make the meat be beloved more than the man that gives it. Let no assembly of 20 be without a score of villains. If there sit 12 women at a table, let a dozen of them be as they are. The rest of your fees, O gods, the senator of Athens, together with a common tag of people, what is amiss in them, you gods, make suitable for destruction. For these my present friends, as they are to me nothing, so in nothing bless them, to nothing are they welcome. And then he opens the covers, and on all of their dishes are tepid water and stones. And so Timon points out in his grace that people are thankless, and these friends of him have done nothing for him, and deserve nothing in return. And so he begins to throw the water at them, and the dishes, and maybe the stones, and it chases them all out. And they're all upset because how dare he turn on them? And one of them's cap, which had a special gem in it that Timon had given him, got knocked out. The irony of their ridiculous selfishness is very, very clear. Act 4 begins with Timon standing outside the city of Athens, cursing the city of Athens, and hoping that everyone in Athens is absolutely destroyed. He then strips off his clothes and goes out naked into the wilderness. Nothing I'll bear from thee but nakedness, thou detestable town. Take thou that too, with multiplying bands. Timon will to the woods, where he shall find the unkindest beast, more kinder than mankind. The gods confound. Hear me, you good gods all, the Athenians both within and out that wall, and grant, as Timon grows, his hate may grow to the whole race of mankind, high and low. Amen. And so begins his misanthropy and his hatred of humanity. One more scene before we cut to what Timon is doing in the woods. And that scene is Flavius and a handful of Timon's servants, who are now without work and without a master. And all of them are mourning his ruin and departure, and Flavius shares what little he has with each of the servants. This scene is important because it's a counterpoint to the opinion that Timon has through the rest of the play. there are some people who are still good and loyal and true, who have good hearts and who care about each other and about Timon. And so although all of his leeching friends are really, really horrible people, not everyone on Earth is like that. So basically for the rest of Act 4 and Act 5, Timon is outside of Athens, out in the dirt, digging in the mud, looking for roots to eat. And there's a series of people who come to visit him while he's out here, outside of society, hating everything and everyone. But before we get to this parade of visitors, we see Timon all alone digging in the mud, looking for roots, and he prays to heaven for these roots, for sustenance for himself, while also cursing all of humanity. And ironically, as he notes very clearly in irony, instead of digging up roots to feed himself, he finds a chest full of gold, the exact thing he needed to survive earlier in Athenian society. However, at this point, gold is completely valueless to him, and he sees it as something particularly evil rather than as something that can benefit him. And so, as each person comes out to find Timon out here in his hole, he offers them gold, similarly to the way he offered presents and gifts earlier in the book. But instead of these being gifts to help his friends, the gold he gives them is a curse. And he curses them as he's giving them gold. He hopes that the gold will destroy them as it destroyed him. The first to visit him is Alcibiades, who is marching with his army on Athens. And he also has with him a couple of prostitutes who are following along with him. Timon offers money to Alcibiades as well as to the prostitutes, hoping to fund Alcibiades against Athens, but also cursing Alcibiades at the same time. The gods confound all in thy conquest, and thee after, when thou hast conquered. He hopes that Alcibiades will pay the Athenians back, but then also that Alcibiades himself will be paid. And giving money to the prostitutes, he asks them to destroy the men that they seduce, as well as to be destroyed themselves by the gold. Alcibiades, seeing Timon's deterioration, swears to get revenge for him on Athens as well. After the army leaves, in comes Epimentus, who has heard that Timon has taken a page out of his book. Men report thou dost affect my manners and dost use them. And so Timon and Epimentus kind of curse back and forth at each other for a while. In some ways, the tone of this could be almost a little bit more affectionate, because Timon sees from Epimentus' perspective at this point. And in spite of their insults back and forth, Epimentus offers him a kind of empathy and even some food at one point. After the exit of Epimentus, in come some thieves, some poor soldiers who have somehow heard that Timon found gold. Instead of trying to hide it from them, he offers it to them as payment for being thieves. He tells them to continue their labors, because all men are ingrateful thieves, and so he begs them to continue to go into Athens and steal from the Athenians. In fact, he argues his point so strongly that after he steps away, one of the thieves says, "He has almost charmed me from my profession by persuading me to it." Next comes his old steward Flavius, who has come to the impoverished Timon to continue to serve him no matter what his circumstances, even if he's naked and sitting in a pit. But Timon points out that no, he actually has plenty of gold, and he gives some of the gold to Flavius. But he doesn't believe in the goodness of mankind in any way at all. At one moment, though, it seems that Flavius has broken through to him, and Flavius says, "Have you forgot me, sir?" And Timon says, "Why dost ask that? I have forgot all men. Then if thou grantst thou art a man, I have forgot thee." And Flavius says, "An honest poor servant of yours." And Timon says, "Then I know thee not. I never had an honest man about me. Aye, all I kept were knaves to serve in meat to villains." When Flavius weeps and offers him money, Timon says, "Had I a steward so true, so just, and now so comfortable? It almost turns my dangerous nature mild. Let me behold thy face. Surely this man was born of woman. Forgive my general and acceptless rashness, you perpetual sober gods. I do proclaim one honest man. Mistake me not, but one, no more I pray. And he's a steward. How fain would I have hated all mankind, and thou redeem'st thyself. But all save thee I fell with curses. So here's the one honest man, but he's not a noble man, he's not a highborn man, he's a steward. The only one who could be noble. And so Timon gives him gold and tells him with the gold to become a misanthrope like himself, to cut himself off from all of humanity. At this point is designated the beginning of Act 5. However, it simply continues the visitors who come to meet Timon. The next two people who come to meet Timon are the painter and the poet, who have heard that he's rich and have come to offer their services again. They will paint him something great, they will write great poetry about him. But Timon overhears them before they arrive. But instead of giving them gold like he does for everyone else, he leads them into a riddle where he calls each one of them a villainous flatterer. And then he starts throwing things at them and driving them away. Finally, the last group to arrive are the senators, and they're being led by Flavius. And they've come to beg help of Timon, because Alcibiades has surrounded the city and they're in trouble. And they know they can't fight off Alcibiades without Timon's help. Not only does Timon refuse to help them, but he tells them that he hopes they all suffer and die. I hate you, I want you all dead. If Alcibiades kills every single one of you, I don't care. I don't care at all. Not in the slightest. I hate you guys. But as the senators keep begging Timon to have mercy on the people of Athens, Timon finally says, commend me to them, and tell them that, to ease them of their griefs, their fears of hostile strokes, their aches, losses, their pangs of loves, with other incident throes that nature's fragile vessel doth sustain in life's uncertain voyage, I will do some kindness to them. I will teach them how to prevent wild Alcibiades' wrath. So I will show them how to escape from Alcibiades. And so all of a sudden the senators get their hopes up again for a moment. And Timon says, I have a tree which grows here by my close, that mine own use invites me to cut down, and shortly must I fell it. Tell my friends, tell Athens, in the sequence of degree, from high to low throughout, that whoso please to stop affliction, let him take his haste, come hither ere my tree hath felt the axe, and hang himself. I pray you, do my greeting. You want to escape Alcibiades? Come on out here and just hang yourselves. And Flavius says, see, that's how he is now. There's no point in continuing to try to persuade him. And so the senators return home rejected. And as they go, Timon says, don't come looking for me anymore. I'm building my tomb by the seaside so that the tides can wash over me in death. You won't ever see me again. The senators return home and discover that Alcibiades is very close and they have no protection and no hope. Meanwhile, a soldier comes out and finds the camp of Timon. And Timon is dead, and he's carved himself an epitaph. The soldier can only read part of it, and so he covers the message with wax so that he can return it to Athens. And the story ends with Alcibiades entering into the gates of Athens in triumph, and the senators, knowing they have no hope against him, surrender. The soldier comes up with the news that Timon is dead and gives the wax epitaph to Alcibiades to read. He reads, here lies a wretched corse, of wretched soul bereft. Seek not my name, a plague consume you wicked caitiffs left. Here lie I, Timon, who, alive all living men did hate. Pass by and curse thy fill, but pass and stay not here thy gate. And as Alcibiades enters into the city, he says, bring me into your city, and I will use the olive with my sword. Make war breed peace, make peace stint war, make each prescribe to other as each other's leech. Let our drums strike. There is a sense that although peace will now be there, now that Alcibiades is in charge, that war and peace are going hand in hand. And Alcibiades does indicate that he's going to get revenge and provide justice on those senators who were so crooked. There isn't a sense of security at the end of this play. And so ends one of the stranger of Shakespeare's plays, and one that is somewhat bitter towards humanity. Thanks for watching. You can click to subscribe, or watch another video, and I'll see you next time.